Good evening, everyone. On behalf of CATS, Center for Advancement of Traditional Building Technology and Skills, I welcome all the speakers and each one of you to the Play Story session of Festival of Places 2020, jointly hosted by Indira Gandhi National Center for the Arts and CATS. The Festival of Places is an initiative of CATS, a not for profit organization working in the area of heritage conservation, management, and advocacy since 2001. We have been working with a vision to highlight local heritage assets, empower local communities, and make heritage conservation participatory and sustainable. An effort such as ours requires technical and financial assistance as well as patronage. You can support and participate in our multiple initiatives and programs by volunteering your skills and contributing financially. Your donation, however small, can help us together contribute to the conservation and protection of our fast disappearing, unprotected, and hitherto unknown heritage assets. Donation to CATS entitles donors to get tax exemption under Section 80G of Income Tax Act. For volunteering your skills for our initiatives, please write to us at info@catsindia.org. You can also support us by buying our heritage souvenirs that raise awareness about unprotected heritage assets in our cities and towns. Do visit Arash, the Heritage Craft Collection, on our website www.indiaheritagehub.org. We at CATS feel very strongly about the dismal state of public spaces in our cities and firmly believe change in the way we think, talk, and use public spaces can only begin at the grassroots by creatively engaging people with places and empowering them to make a difference to places and spaces around. The Festival of Places is an idea born out of the spirit of volunteerism to come together, collaborate, co create, and celebrate places that nurture health, happiness, and foster community living. The Festival of Places aims to bring people, places, and memories and their interrelationships at the forefront of public discussion. It envisions to investigate places, the people who inhabit them, the collective and individual memories that are integral to places, and present them in a new way to leverage discussions on the future of public spaces. The festival provides an opportunity to people for sharing their personal narratives. Moreover, the festival aims to help discover the much overlooked human dimension of places. The main highlight of the festival this year is Play Stories, a series of online storytelling sessions that will help understand the hidden dimensions, multiple interpretations, and varied memories associated with places, highlighting their distinct characteristics as well as unraveling the bond that people have with them, a connection that lives through their experiences. The storytelling sessions by professionals, scholars, and students from diverse fields focused on public spaces have been planned around the theme of exploring memory in places. In our last Play Story session, we talked about the experiences and memories around Dr. Ram Manohar Lohia Park in Saibabad and explored the different ways in which people connect with the park and why such places are so special. Today, we will leave the city lights and travel east towards Kolkata. Just close your eyes for a while and picture in your mind what imagery does the following description conjure in your mind? A geological formation of small canyons, a patch of dry forest of sonjuri trees, an eroded landscape of red laterite soil surrounded by a river with knee-deep water, a pastoral landscape dotted with mud houses of Adivasis, a weekly market, Shanibarer Haat, in the forest, bowls singing their ektaras to the tune of the winds, and a renowned poet deeply inspired by this ordinariness composing his famous poem, Amar Choto Nadi. Doesn't this feel like a beautiful place to visit? So now let us hear play stories of a different genre from Kopai and Khoai as our storytellers and expert Ms. Amita Sinha, Mr. Kalashpati Maurya, and Ms. Upma Sen take us through public spaces in a very different terrain. A mosaic of many landscapes shaped by the presence of water in the river Kopai, in the nalas and pools of Khoai, dotted with the tiny yellow flowers of Sonjuri trees, and in the pukurs of Santal hamlets. Our play storyteller Kalashpati Maurya is an architect and urban planner by profession. He did his schooling from Bhilai, Chhattisgarh, which is also his hometown. After that, he completed his graduation in architecture from National Institute of Technology, Raipur in 2018 and master's in city planning from Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur in 2020. He is currently living and practicing in his hometown, Bhilai. Upma Sen is an architect and planner by profession. She is a postgraduate of the Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur. Her research interest includes public spaces, livability, and inclusive development. She believes in working towards a sustainable and better tomorrow. When not working, she is a visual arts enthusiast. She likes to explore different places and cultures. Our place expert, Ms. Amita Sinha, is a former professor in the Department of Landscape Architecture at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign and has taught in the Department of Architecture and Regional Planning, IIT Kharagpur, and in the Humanities and Social Science Department at IIT Gandhinagar. She is the author of Landscape in India, Forms and Meanings and Cultural Landscapes of India, imagined, enacted, and reclaimed. She is editor of Landscape Perception and co-editor of Cultural Landscapes of South Asia, Studies in Heritage Conservation and Management. Her articles have been published in Landscape Journal, Journal of Landscape.
Ma'am, you're on mute. Urvashi ma'am. Ma'am, you've gone on mute.
Yeah. Yeah. Her articles have been published in Landscape Journal, Journal of Landscape Architecture, International Journal of Heritage Studies, Journal of Urban Design, Studies in the History of Gardens and Design Landscapes, Architecture plus Design, Mark Publications, and Tecton. She was a senior Fulbright researcher at the Indian National Trust for Art and Cultural Heritage in New Delhi in 2009 and is the recipient of Fulbright Nehru Academic and Professional Excellence Award Fellowship in 2018-19. She received the National Merit Award, American Society of Landscape Architects for Cultural Heritage Project on Taj Mahal, India in 2001 and Environmental Design Research Association Award in 2018. We now begin our walk through the Kopai and Kauai landscape with Ms. Amita Sinha, Kailashpati and Upma. Would you like to introduce Kailash, Upma or Amita ma'am? Would you like to introduce the topic today?
Ma'am,
Yeah. You can just briefly introduce the topic and then I'll play the video.
Yes, so this story actually begins a few years ago when I came back to my alma mater to teach. After 37 years, I was actually doing a project on Tagore's houses in Uttarayan, but then this larger landscape became so much more fascinating. And so I conducted a design workshop in January of 2019, and then we came back to present. And during the pandemic, Upma and Kailashpati, we got together and we said, we should put our work together. And Kailash has been making movies, and Upma has been, very, very interested in Santhal architecture and Santhal culture. So that is how we put together a video. And we thank you very much. We thank CATS and you, Urvashi, for giving us this opportunity to present our work.
So I'll share my screen now and I'll play the video.
We take you on a journey through the landscape of Shantiniketan. No, it is not what you're thinking, the renowned Vishwabharati campus. This is a different place, part of Shantiniketan, yet distinct, not quite urban, nor entirely rural. It feels pastoral, far away from the hustle and bustle of a city, but it's not quite the countryside. This landscape has been the subject of poetry and paintings. Here the boundary between art and architecture dissolves, and slow rhythms of life are celebrated in music and dance. The landscape has been shaped by the presence of water in the river, in the nalas and pools of Kauai, and in the pukurs of Santhal hamlets. Kailashpati Maurya, Upma Sen, and I, Amita Sinha, shared our experiences as we walked, photographed, conversed with locals, and imagined the future of this place. We will walk along the river Kopai, wander through the lanes of Santhal hamlets, listen to Baul minstrels, and be immersed in the sights and sounds of bustling hearts on the Kauai. Our narrative begins when we did a design workshop in foggy January. This was nearly 2 years ago. We tell the story of a day in Shantiniketan, spent to explore its heritage and to plan for its future. A map is what the static eye in the sky sees and cannot adequately capture our perceptions and memories, but it does orient us to where we are. This slice of land is in the northeastern outer fringe of Chota Nagpur Plateau. It is the region of red gritty laterite and alluvium known as Rar. The undulating land known as Bhuvandanga, meaning inhabited by dacoits, was barren until about 150 years ago. Today it's a lush landscape of paddy fields on the banks of Kopai, rural hamlets, wildlife sanctuary, remnant Khowai, Benuria Canal, all north of Vishwabharati campus. It is a mosaic of many diverse landscapes stitched together by dirt paths, narrow pedestrian lanes, and wider metal roads. Each landscape is a rich multi-sensorial experience and tells the story of its own culture evolving in tandem with land, flora, fauna, and the seasons.
My friends and I decided to follow the river Kopai that seemed to be the lifeline of this serene landscape. Our journey started from the Kopai viewpoint, which is a picnic spot attracting many visitors who walk into the river from the lowest stone bridge. This spot on the river bank provides a picturesque view of the lush greenery, a dilapidated brick kiln, and agricultural fields in the distance. As the sun rose, the place stirred into life, becoming active and lively with visitors having chai in tea stalls and buying food from itinerant vendors. We observed a tourist bus parked and visitors in colorful clothes were sitting in big circle. Walking further, we admired the neat row of green plants in farms that depended upon Kopai for water. We saw women carrying water in pails to the small eateries catering to the tourists. We were sad to see the illegal land mining on the riverbank. This landscape was serene and beautiful. It felt an escape from the chaotic lifestyle of the city. As we walked along the river towards southwest, we observed a shift in the land cover in the dry flood plain. The riverbank suddenly transformed to a rural landscape with agricultural fields on both sides. Villagers were planting mustard on the floodplain. At some places, where the water level was low, villagers carrying firewood were wading through the river. We were engulfed by natural flowering shrubs as we walked further. It was a fragrant and colorful stretch, a very pleasant experience indeed. There are many viewpoints along the river for admiring the picturesque views because of the meandering character of the river. After crossing two hamlets, we came across an active brick kiln. The riverbank is a temporary escape and relaxing place for the workers as they enjoy their lunch, and some also dived in the water. Having arrived at that moment, we also dived in the water. As we proceeded further, we observed a change in land cover once again. A large stretch of harvested agricultural fields came into view. The texture of the harvested field glittered in the scorching afternoon sun. As the afternoon shadows lengthened, the landscape looked different, so we ended our walk along the river and recorded our observations. We saw a road leading to a Santhal village nearby. I wonder what we could have found there. Upma, can you take us through that village?
I took a Toto ride through the Santhal villages with a few friends. Growing up in cities all our life, this was an adventure for us. Walking through the alleys of these hamlets, we experienced Santhal life firsthand. The Santhal tribe has inhabited Shantiniketan since ages, and there still exist several such tribal hamlets in this region. I took a tour through a few, namely Pearsonpalli, Balipara, Fuldanga, Gwalpara and Polashmoni. While some of the hamlets have already undergone urbanization and the houses were being built with new materials such as tin sheets for roofing, they still retain the original village character in parts. What captured my attention immediately was the color of the huts. We asked the local people about this and were astounded to know that they derive these pigments from nature and materials of daily use. As for example, they obtain white from lime, black from carbon, blue from indigo and red from the local soil.
I had observed that the soil in Shantiniketan has a deep reddish tint to it.
Yes, the soil in this region is locally called Lal Mati, which means red soil in English. As we walked along, we saw more Santhal huts with murals and paintings on their walls. These murals depict scenes from daily life, a man and a woman going on a journey, a woman holding a bird, peacock and horse painted on the wall. The tribal paintings and murals bring in an artistic vibe to the meandering alleys. Some buildings have very interesting perforated walls, while some have beautiful jali patterned fenestrations. These are called living walls. Their perforations have interesting patterns and allow light and breeze. They are artistic expressions of the boundary between the inside and outside. As we walked further into the hamlets, the villagers' daily activities unfolded in front of our eyes. The Santhals live a hard-working yet simple life. Tagore found a different beauty in their lives, which translates into his poem Shautal Me. যায় আসে সাঁওতাল মেয়ে শিমুল গাছের তলে কাঁকর বিছানো পথ বেয়ে মোটা শাড়ি আঁট করে ঘিরে আছে তনু কালো দেহ বিধাতার ভোলা মন কারিগর কেহ কোনো কালো পাখিটিরে গড়িতে গড়িতে শ্রাবণের মেঘেও তরিতে উপাদান খুঁজি ওই নারী রচিয়াছে বুঝি Somewhere while wandering, I stumbled upon this serene view. A lady continued with her chores while ducks flocked around and animals wandered by. We found our way into a traditional Santhal home, mud walls and metal or thatched roofs and a small door opening. Most Santhal homes had a typical courtyard surrounded by mud huts and open verandas. The courtyard is the center of living for the family. Their kitchen is mostly open or semi-open. There is a granary storage and a small kitchen garden in the courtyard in most houses. Poultry and animal rearing is a common sight in Santhal households. Having no vehicular traffic, the roads doubled as an area for drying grains in the sun. We met these kids in Balipara and played with them for a while. They were joyously celebrating a birthday with a humble cake made out of mud and streamers made out of leaves. It takes moments like these for us to realize how content one can be even without the glitz of city lights. I wondered how the tribal lifestyle will shape them. Would they grow up to make murals and handicrafts like the older villagers did? I had heard about the Khowai Hut, where one can buy these handicrafts. Amita, would you tell us about the hut and what made it so special?
Upma, the huts are held on the Khowai and they have a dazzling display of Santhal crafts. But what's even more interesting is the setting. It's a unique landscape. Khowai, meaning eroded land, is a generic term for ravines that were a dominant feature of this landscape. The undulating land was eroded by ephemeral streams in natural drainage channels, forming gullies that became deep and wide ravines near the river. This barren wilderness was a fascinating landscape to poets and painters. Vinod Bihari Mukherjee, who lived and taught in Tagore School, painted the Khowai in the minimalist modern style sometime in the mid-1930s. Rabindranath Tagore remembers, in the hollows of the sandy soil, the rainwater had ploughed deep furrows, carving out miniature mountain ranges full of red gravel and pebbles of various shapes, through which ran tiny streams, revealing the geography of Lilliput. However, little of the ravines remain today. In the last century and a half, the barren landscape was transformed slowly by adding fresh topsoil and planting trees. The remnant Khowai on the edge of Sonajuri forest is a glimpse into the unique and fragile landscape nestling between the wooded riverbank and farms on the north and protected forest on its south. Khowai is the site of daily and weekly huts. The weekly hut is an organized affair with the craftsmen seated in linear rows. The daily hut is spread over a larger area. The small timber pavilions and colorful umbrellas over displayed wares are eye-catching. Our Toto joined a long line inching their way on a Saturday evening to the hut. On my left is the Benuria Canal running parallel to the road. The landscape I had photographed earlier had tall eucalyptus and sonajuri trees soaring above a slightly undulating terrain covered with lal mati. It felt eerie, a kind of abstracted forest defined by stark vertical and horizontal plains. By evening, the forest was transformed. It had come alive with music, dance, and an array of beautiful objects displayed enticingly on the ground. The empty grove was now a performance space in the weekly hut. As I began walking, the hut unfolded like paintings coming alive, each frame dominated by rich colors, forms, and textures, the likes of which I had never seen before. This was a dynamic landscape, changing with the ceaseless flow of people as they walked, paused, stooped, squatted, reached out, and struck up conversations with the vendors.
This was no ordinary heart of plastic toys and nylon saris. Here were handcrafted objects, miniature tablas, bamboo flutes, key rings, and fans. There was, of course, Tagore memorabilia. There were door hooks jutting out of auspicious Ganeshas, boats, cottages, fish, and rabbits, and colorful beaded necklaces and bracelets, and gaily patterned cloth bags and purses. The tall tree trunks became part of the stage setup in showcasing handicrafts and became the backrest for a sketcher. The forest became a performance arena for Santhali women dancing gracefully in a circle with a pot balanced on their heads. A Baul minstrel was singing an enigmatic song on his ektara. The itinerant Baul creates an instant musical landscape event by his presence. I wondered about the meaning of his song. Upma had told me that Baul thinking questions the social mores and cannot be strictly categorized into either Hindu or Islamic doctrines. As I walked further, on my right I saw the Bandh with water falling into the natural Nala in the Sonajuri forest. It was an interesting viewing spot with people wading through water and taking photographs of the scenic view. The mapping captures the flow of people through the landscape as they move, pause to buy, eat, see the dances, and listen to music. Khowai becomes the stage set for the actors, vendors, buyers, Baul performers, dancers, and toto drivers to create a cultural scene in which one can be totally immersed. The daily heart loomed into view. A lot more items were spread under colorful umbrellas. People rested on the timber pavilions. The forest was here, but somehow seemed tamed by the presence of these structures. As I walked further, the trees gave way to a line of timber buildings decorated with interesting murals. These were lodges and restaurants, reminding me that this was a tourist site. As darkness fell, the naked bulb illuminated the living wall, a modern jali, a backdrop to the street food vendor cooking over a stove. A small circle of admirers had formed around Baul musicians. Light was streaming from a lantern on the bamboo pole. The forest beyond was totally dark.
খুব বড় হাট মানে এত বড় হয়ে যায় এখন মেলার মতো তো এই গানটির মধ্যে আমাদের গোটা বীরভূমে কোথায় কি আছে সেটা বর্ণনা করেছে এক পদকর্তা। ও গো দেশ বিদেশের মানুষ যাও এই বীরভূম যাও যাও এই বীরভূম।
This unique cultural landscape of Kopai and Khowai has stories for us if we learn to read it. These stories are about places and people. Kopai is snaking its way through the plains, and the undulating terrain of Khowai, carved out by ephemeral streams, are central to the lives of the communities living here. They are fragile landscapes. The delicate balance between nature and culture is threatened by overuse and exploitation of natural resources. Exploring these landscapes was a memorable experience which we have relived with you. We want others to discover the places for themselves. And for that, we propose a network of trails that will open up the landscape to the explorer.
To experience the viewpoints and experience the essence of the rural life associated to the river Kopai, a system of bike and walking trails can be proposed along the path which we took during our journey. It will start from the bridge and end at the beginning of Santhal village.
And a guided tour through the Santhal hamlets would be an added attraction to tourists in Shantiniketan. It could incorporate a hands-on workshop, a sumptuous tribal cuisine meal, and much more. Also, the pukus or the water bodies in most of these hamlets require attention as they have been drying up due to various reasons.
Khowai is an ecologically sensitive zone where too many built structures and a high human footfall is threatening its integrity. To reduce pressure on this fragile ecosystem, hearts can be held at various sites in rotation, allowing this landscape to recover and regenerate. The network of trails will take visitors to other places and distribute footfall. Preserving the cultural heritage of Shantiniketan entails conserving its landscapes. This can only happen when we understand how culture and ecology are intertwined and interdependent. Understanding comes from direct experience, and we hope the stories we have told you will make you explore these unique landscapes.
Uh, Thank you very much for this very wonderful presentation and walk through the unique landscape of Kopai and Khowai. I will now invite Professor Amita Sinha, Kailash Pati, and Upma to please take the conversation forward.
Well, I feel that the river gathers in itself many strands of a story about nature, culture, art and artisans, poetry and music, slow rhythms of life. So I wanted to ask Kailash, what drew you to the river? How did you discover it?
Actually, when we went to Shantiniketan for the workshop, we decided to cover different places in different groups. And I didn't know much about the Shantiniketan as I only visited here, I think, 6 years ago when I was doing my undergrad. So I was not familiar with the place as such. So I heard that there is one river in the north. Let me share one map right now so we can discuss. So when we went to Shantiniketan, I heard that there was this river which is running on the north of the Shantiniketan. So I was pretty much sure at that moment that I will be the one which will be in the team which will be studying the river. And since my childhood, I have been attracted to waterfronts because of the serene nature which they provide us. So I, along with my team of four, went to the riverfront to a place which is known as Kopai viewpoint. And this was the view which we got once we arrived at the Kopai viewpoint. So as the video shows that it was an existing picnic spot, like this was a picnic spot and a recreational space for tourists also. But there were few people, so we found that there were few people there, and we found it to be a calm and a peaceful place at that moment. So now when we were at the bridge, which serves as a viewpoint, we observed this meandering nature of the river, and we had a urge to follow it. And at that point, we found an existing small trail which was going along with the riverbank to a small village nearby. So we just simply followed that trail, which made our journey much more interesting and memorable than what we could have experienced by just simply standing at the viewpoint only.
You think the river is healthy?
The river waters seemed to be healthy in terms of the water quality at that time. We observed that it was clean throughout our journey, and it was going in between the villages, and there was no stagnation of any kind of solid waste or and neither any signs of eutrophication. Though it is not suitable for drinking, but it is being used for bathing and irrigation of field. Like at this point, you observed like some people were having a bath, and there were also some small mustard plantations were going on near to the river. But there was this natural process going on with the river, that is the silting and deposition action. And indeed, sand mining, like it is shown in these images, there were indeed illegal sand mining was also happening in these places. We asked the local people from the village, and they told us that in the night some people just come with their tractors, and they just take the sand without anyone's permission, and it was quite illegal. And this sand mining is in fact acting as a catalyst in the process of depriving the retention which the river banks needed. So we also studied the satellite imagery of the river from 2000 to 2019, and observed that Kopai had shifted its course during this period of 19 years, and which can be observed in this image. So here the river path in blue shows the river profile which was in 2001, and the other color shows the how this profile has changed in 18 years itself. So indeed, this sand mining is also is one of the reason for this shifting course, and the afforestation also, like here in this place. And here also, like this brick kiln was there. And yes, coming to the brick kiln, not only the sand mining, but there was an existing brick kiln also near to the river, which was using the clay near the river banks. So I think these activities are partially responsible for the change in river course in this period.
Kailash, you're an architect and a planner. What would you do to make sure that the river is not harmed by these activities and people have access to it?
Now, it is an interesting point to discuss, because as we walked along the river bank amidst the villages and its grasslands and its dried flood plain, with the natural viewpoints along the turn, we experienced a sort of calmness, as you have also seen in the video. Like there were flowers there, and there were many different kind of fields there. So we just traveled through those fields, and we had this serenity and calmness there. Now that calmness was there due to the fact that the river banks were in its natural state, without much human intervention, and just in the countryside. And when we talk about bringing accessibility for the people there, so it brings a lot of hardscape, a lot of infrastructure development and urban elements. Now I'm not saying that this infrastructure developments are not required, but when we, but when someone design a very good waterfront for the people there, also, I can say that one can design a very well to make it a good waterfront, but the experience which we had at that time will not be there. And as a city person, I found nature and the rural surroundings fascinating. So, to provide that experience only, we actually proposed this trail along with the farmlands and riverbank. Now, this trail should not be having it should not be too much built up, so that it can be easily integrated with the countryside. It should not have so much of the urban character with it, but only the necessary things like the paving can be there, and only some lighting elements can be there, but not too much of urban elements, so that it can retain its rural character. And also, we don't encourage people to rest much along with the trail, except for certain viewpoints, which can be provided at this meandering points here, and here. And also, we to preserve the river banks, the illegal sand mining should be monitored. And also, the this big kilns can be restricted from using the soil near the river bank. And also, we propose a formation of a tow wall and afforestation at places which are at a risk of siltation in future.
Well, thanks, Kailash. I think those are excellent ideas, and I hope that these will be taken up, because the river is a great resource, and so are the Santhal hamlets. So I'm going to ask this question of Upma. What drew you to these villages?
Okay, so growing up in Bengal all my life mostly, Shantiniketan always had a very big influence on me. Let me share my screen with you. I can show you something. So I have grown up listening to Baul music, appreciating tribal art, and I was always fascinated by Nandalal Bose's paintings and Ram Kinkar Beje's sculptures. These often have portrayed many like stills from Santhal lives and that of the Santhal tribe. So when I was in Shantiniketan for our workshop, I at once knew that I wanted to experience the Santhal life in first hand. I wanted to at least walk through these Santhal paras. And so I, along with a few of my friends, took on exploring these hamlets.
Tell us more about these paras.
So the Santhals are a very indigenous tribe inhabiting in this area since long. There are a few Santhal hamlets in and around Shantiniketan. As we saw in the video, Pearsonpalli, Balipara, Bhuvandanga, Palashmani, Goalpara. So all these villages have vivid stories. Pearsonpalli is named after W. Pearson, who is a person who has worked for the upliftment of Santhals in Shantiniketan. Balipara is named after a Santhal person called Bali, who was a close ally of Rabindranath Tagore. And Bhuvandanga is named after a famous dacoit, Bhuvan dacoit of this region. We were lucky to have been able to interact with a few villagers and know much about the stories of these places and their lives. They have a very simple lifestyle. Rearing livestock is a part of that, is a big part of that. Their homes, the Santhal homes, this typical courtyard houses with mud huts all around, a granary in the center. We were really fascinated by the mud architecture of these huts and the traditional vernacular style of this region.
Well, this section looks really fascinating. It's almost like a painting in itself. Tell us more about mud housing.
Okay. The kind of mud architecture that we saw here is quite unique to this region and must be conserved. That's what I felt. However, in some of the hamlets like Buvandanga, Balipara, there are more concrete houses. The shifting trend is quite visible from mud houses to the concrete permanent structures. In Bhuvandanga, rather, we saw more of cement concrete housing than the traditional homes. There are quite many examples all around the world of evolved mud architecture that are constructed as permanent structures, as for example, the architecture style of Laurie Baker. I believe that the mud housing in the Santhal Paras can be promoted with a proper framework. It can meet the aspirations of the people. This would require regulations, frameworks, guidelines, and many organizations coming together. I remember a particular house from this village, which was just beside the Kwai, Palashmani. So this was a very small hut with geometric patterned jalis, which are called living walls. Such art and architecture must be conserved, and there are artists and architects who are working towards it. But I believe a more conscious effort need to be put forward to prevent this from extinction. So I had a question for you, Amita ma'am. I wanted to ask you, with this thriving huts, beside this is the village beside Palashmani, beside the Khwai, Palashmani. So the Khwai is having this Shonibarer hut, and don't you think that this thriving hut is affecting the ecology of the Khwai?
Yeah, for sure. There are going to be long-term repercussions. Soil will be denuded. There'll be waste that will bring scavengers that will disturb the local ecosystem. And given the success of the hearts, actually, I think hearts should be going on. They should not be removed. But again, speaking about control and regulation, there has to be a regulatory process in place. The hearts can be held at other places in rotation so that the impact is distributed over a larger area and it's not concentrated, in its duration.
The beautiful handcrafts are in the signature Shantiniketan style. What are these objects crafted from? What is their role in the aesthetics of placemaking? Can you tell us
Oh,
about it?
that's a good question. Let me take you to Amar Kutir. Okay, I'm having a few. Oh, there we go. So we must go to Amar Kutir. I hope everybody can see this map. Yes?
You have to share the screen, ma'am.
Okay.
We can't yet.
I think, let me see. I am not able to share the screen for some reason. How about now?
It's visible right now.
Oh, good. Sorry for the delay. Okay, so we must go to Amar Kutir, and this is a handloom cooperative. It's actually nestling on the banks of Kopai in a forest. The forest here hides the Kwai, although red soil or ranga mati crunches under my feet when I enter the complex. So in addition to being the center for craft production that has improved the economic livelihood in neighboring villages, this is actually a historic site. It's associated with India's freedom movement. And this quote from Sushen Mukherjee, founder of Amar Kutir, which actually means my cottage, sums up his aspiration for building a self-reliant community. What Sushen Mukherjee says is to build a commune through a gamut of activities such as innovative farming and agriculture, printing of cotton fabric saris, handloom, and leatherwork in a tiny, backward, and underdeveloped segment of rural Bengal. A commune which in later years will become the center for freedom, equality, and peasant movement in the district of Birbhum. So Sushen Mukherjee was very much influenced by Gandhi's Swadeshi movement and Tagore's vision for sustainable rural development. In 1927, he acquired land from the Zamindar of Surul village to set up a center for hand-printed cotton.
And can you tell us more about this place?
Yes. Let me take you on a journey here. As we enter, you see the food vendors. They have parked their carts to cater to the stream of visitors who peak in the winter season. And the space is enlivened by a baul singer seated in the pavilion. He sings to the tunes of Land, Matir Shur, and he describes Kopai as entangled in his mind and his songs. Tagore's statue in the central island looms into view. Batik and leather workshops are part of the complex. Batik dyeing is being done.
I think few people know about the connection of this place with the national freedom struggle. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes, a small museum on the premises narrates the history of Amar Kutir. Sushen Mukherjee and his compatriots were involved in freedom struggle and were repeatedly jailed by the colonial government. The political activities included the Birbhum conspiracy and Quit India movement, and many were sentenced to hard labor and solitary confinement in Andaman Island. Sushen Mukherjee's legacy is living, as witnessed in the rising popularity of handicrafts of Amar Kutir sold in the retail showroom, as well as in Khoi Hearts. And so his life is actually part of a larger narrative of the struggle to lift India's villages out of poverty and of tremendous sacrifices by freedom fighters to obtain independence for the nation. Pannanal Dasgupta joined Sushen Mukherjee at Amar Kutir in 1938, and he began organizing villagers, taking a leading role in Quit India movement. His efforts led to the establishment of Amar Kutir Society for Rural Development as a registered body in 1978.
And do you think, can I propose a trail along the Kopai River to come to the Amar Kutir?
Yes, there is a path behind the buildings to the grove of trees, and the view opens up to the river. It's kind of muddy and placid over here. So as we've seen, that Kopai really defines and sustains this unique cultural landscape of Khowai, forests, farm fields, and hamlets. It's never really far away, although not always easy to get to. Finding it behind Amar Kutir, as we have just done, or glimpsing it through a bamboo thicket, coming close to wade in it. Each is a memorable experience we've relived with you today. Kopai snaking its way through farm fields and the undulating terrain of Kauai on the edge of the forest are fragile landscapes. And this delicate balance between nature and culture is threatened by overuse and exploitation of the resources. So once again, I say that preserving cultural heritage entails conserving landscape in sustainable ways. Kopai and Kauai have to be protected for their beauty to be appreciated by posterity. So here we are in Shantiniketan. We have just taken you through this landscape which surrounds the ashram. And our next, I think, step is to go to ashram, which we will not do today. Hopefully, in a few, in a few months, or we can get back there and share with you this really very interesting story of landscape that was single-handedly, I think, rejuvenated by Tagore's father, Devendranath Tagore. And this was about a century ago, 100 years ago, and still classes are being held under the trees. It's a great university, and it's a landscape that sustains it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It seems to be a very, very interesting place, in which nature is a very, very predominant element. And, I would just like to quote one, in the words of Gandhiji himself, that the true India is to be found not in its few cities, but in its 700,000 villages. If the villages perish, India will perish too. And I think these kind of landscapes exemplify the importance of the hinterland with the metropolis. I would like to have a question for all three of you, whoever, thinks can answer that and enlighten us to these aspects of the landscape as well. People perceive places in different ways. What kind of a difference have you observed in the perception of the visitors to the place in terms of the landscape and the people who are living there? How do they perceive that? And what are the differences that you have observed in your journey through the landscape?
Well, I think the villages have lived like this. Their lifestyle which is very close to the land, to natural processes, hadn't really changed for the longest time. And then in sometime in the 19th century, what had happened was, I think the land was getting denuded, and many of these villages had really slided into poverty. So there's been a kind of a revival. I think more land has been now cultivated in the century and a half, and with increasing tourism, we see people, in totos everywhere. And of course, the tourism is largely regional. So for the Bhadralok from Kolkata and other cities in Eastern India, West Bengal especially, it's really coming to a place which is so different, from the city, and they appreciate it very much. But as we were doing the workshop, we often wondered, how do the villagers, think about the totos and the tourists? There was one village, Palashmani, that Upma had talked about, which is actually was the scene of a very well-known Bengali serial, and many people come just to see the village because they had seen the serial. I guess this was a few years ago. So I felt that the villagers are under scrutiny, and but they seem to be carrying on their life. I don't know what Upma has to say about this, and what she thinks is going on by way of this being seen and um, being the object of,
Yes.
this intense, I think, scrutiny on the part of large numbers of people.
When we went to the villages, in some we observed that there are a lot of tourists roaming around and quite scrutinizing the things. That's when we thought like the Santhal hamlets are a attraction, but then the tourists coming here, that doesn't really help to their growth. So that's why we proposed that there should be a trail, a guided tour or something which can help the two parties. Maybe there should be a model village, and the village, like the existing village, shouldn't be disturbed by the tourists and all, because with regional, there is also a lot of international tourists here, because Shantiniketan, Vishwa Bharati holds a lot of festivals which are well known all around the world. There, the Mami, I think you visited, you have been part of two of these festivals. You have visited them, right? So
Yes,
you
yes.
know what is the crowd like there, and obviously some of the crowd will crawl into the villages to visit the places. So I think there should be this kind of arrangements which will help tourism as well as the villages to grow and live their own lives.
Yeah, I
And
think
if
the scripted path would help actually in in avoiding the intrusion into the lives of the villagers. So.
Yes, and what are the ways in which you feel the lives of the local community depend on these natural elements? How do they connect with them on a daily basis? What is the significance of these elements in their life?
Well, the water body used to be, the pukur used to be the center of the public, life, so to speak, in the village. Of course, there are other sites also, nearby Maidans, where they would hold their festivals. But what I think concerns us most is today is the close relationship, between water and life that is kind of now being attenuated, being reduced. So when we talk about harmony between a land, river, um, life in the village, it is, farming, it is going to the pukur for the daily bath, and getting water for the day. It's and it's, as Upma showed us, it's about using the land and for not only for eating but also for building the habitat. The clay, comes from the riverbed and from the pukur bed. Actually, not so much from the river, but from the pukur bed of the pukurs. And the vegetable dye is used in decorations, in cloth printing, batik, for instance, which has become very popular as a result of Kala Bhavan professors taking up batik after they visited Indonesia. Yes, it is a life which is very sustainable, in the sense, as Gandhi would have said, everything that you can get, within 5 kilometers, 5 miles, it makes you self-sufficient, whether it is food, cloth, building materials.
Yes, and exactly. And I think, the paintings that you showed or the murals that you showed on the walls of the Santhal houses also, depicts their very close connection with nature and the value that they, kind of put to these kind of natural elements shows in the, the theme of those murals as well. And as you mentioned, there are a lot of these smaller public spaces like the pukurs where the daily life chores revolve around those kind of elements. Are there any other, larger spaces where the people actually, gather for their own celebrations, some festivities or things like that, other than the heart that is being organized?
In this particular village, Pearsonpalli, it's a linear village. So we observed there's a little school where the Santhal kids go. There is a big Maidan beside it. So the village ends at the Maidan and their festivals take place there. So they have a few festivals which we are not very aware of, but their own kinds, where they put up their melas, their kind of events. So these are one, two small Maidans which we saw. They have their courtyards. The Santhal houses are these courtyard houses. Most of their life opens up on the courtyard. They use their roads, the narrow lanes, like they are mostly kacha roads, which doesn't have a lot of vehicular traffic. So they use these places to dry their grains. So these are how they have used different spaces for gathering, for daily activities. Courtyard, the roads, and this Maidan were the biggest examples which we could see in a first hand.
Yes, because I'm sure the kind of the heart that we are talking about, the Shaniwar heart, looks more of kind of curated for the tourists, and it doesn't show the wares which actually the locals might be kind of looking for and buying and transacting in. So I think it would be also good to kind of preserve the and also allow maybe work out some kind of experiential format for people who actually want to familiarize themselves with the daily lives of people, their festivals, and their ways of living. So that could be an added, experience to the whole landscape. Uh, Renu Singhal is asking a question. Renu, would you want to unmute yourself and ask the question?
Yes. Yeah. Good evening to everybody. I'd like to say that it was very, well coordinated presentation between all the presenters and very interesting. I'd just like to carry on from your question, about, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can.
About community facilities, education facilities, where are they located? You spoke about, self-sufficient villages within 5 kilometers. What about the other public places or facilities which are used by these people? Where are those located? Another question I have is for Mr. Kailash. She was talking about the water of the river being quite clear and non-polluted. Is that a traditionally conscious effort not to pollute the river water?
Was there, sorry, what? Traditionally?
Conscious effort.
Okay, that one. I think that
Yeah.
clear water there is because there is not much urban interference. Because what happened to these water bodies, if I'm not wrong, being an urban planner, you studied that all these big lakes and all these water bodies just act as your recharging. Like all the storm water and rainwater from the cities, we just discharge it onto this river, all those water bodies. So in that stretch, there wasn't any outlet from the nearby city. So I think that was one of the reason. That's why the water is clear. And the second factor is that because it was surrounded by the villages, and I found that the perception of the villagers towards this natural elements is that they actually respect all these elements. There is
Mm.
a what can I say? There is a correlation between their lifestyle and all of these natural elements. So that was one of the reason. That's why the river was clear there. But when we started from that Kopai viewpoint, after that point, that was the first place where the tourists actually interact with that place, and we saw some amount of solid waste accumulated there, and also some of the dumpings of what can I say? They just
Mhm.
dump all these rituals things like
Hmm.
coconut and all those flowers into the river. So it's our mindset from the urban people basically, but it was not there
So
when
it's
we
the
were talking
visitors who
through the
pollute.
what.
It's the visitors who pollute,
Yes,
not the
it was the
locals.
visitors, but not the villagers. Yes, they were having a mutual respect for all of these elements.
Yes.
And Amita ma'am, what about, the facilities, community facilities and education, like schools and all that? Where do you find these?
So yes, there is a school. Actually, Upma showed the Maidan and the school in her
Okay. Oh,
in her
okay.
images.
Yeah, yeah. Right.
And
Right.
Sriniketan, was established for rural development, and I think Sriniketan is still involved in some ways in improving, the farming techniques. But the villages are struggling. I think a lot more help is needed uh, for improving the economic livelihood. With improvement in economic livelihood also comes, I think, improvement in living and more opportunities for sending the children to college, perhaps, and certainly their art and architecture are really deserving to be emulated. So what can we learn by way of bringing back decoration in architecture today, modern architecture today, which is so devoid of this of art, I feel, or at least modern art, modern architecture has done away with this integration between art and architecture.
Right.
So there's another question from Sujit Mehta. Sujit, would you like to unmute yourself and ask the question? Okay, I'll read the question. The question is, where are the places of worship?
Okay, to answer to this, if we particularly look at the Santhal places of worship, so in the Santhal huts, in the center, like where you have your courtyard, in every house we saw there's this Tulsi Bedi, the little Tulsi plant, and people put diyas to it. There are also different gods and goddesses, which they have murals and sculptures embedded in their walls. So these are the few worshipping elements that we found in and around the Santhal villages.
It's actually a little bit disturbing that the god, the Santhal god, who actually has, in one of the villages I saw a pavilion. Now the Santhals are also they started worshipping Saraswati and Ganesh, and so the Hindu gods and goddesses are becoming popular. So, which means that the original, worship of the god, which is very connected to nature, absolutely a natural force, is kind of slowly dying out.
Okay. Professor K.T. Ravindran has a question for Kailash. Sir, would you like to unmute yourself and ask the question?
Thank you. Very nice presentations. I love the way everybody is engaged so softly with the landscape and the place. That's really nice listening to it. My question to Kailash was, actually I have typed it, I don't know why you could have just read it. But anyway, I'll just ask the question again. You had come up when you were suggesting about the erosion on the sides of the river. You had suggested toe walls as one of the means of preventing. That's a very interventionist and kind of hard landscape approach. Would it be better if a soft landscape approach is done with planting material, indigenous plants, or various other modes of stabilizing the ground rather than creating toe walls on the side of the riverbed?
Sir, actually, there were two factors regarding this. First of all, when you were traveling along with the river bank, so the first one is the buffer between the border of the floodplain of the river and the border of the end point of the villages. So it was around 50 to 100 meter that barrier was there. So yes, soft landscaping can be done, but what we felt with our personal experiences is that soft landscaping is possible only at that places where we have enough space to make a not so much steep slope. Okay, because there were some places where due to the sand mining there's there's a direct drop between our land and our water interface. And if we would want to make a soft landscape and we want to create a slope, so it can, I think, affect the villages. So at that point, I think the toe walls are useful. But yes, indeed, where at those places where the distance is much, yes, we can create the soft landscape, because ultimately the soft landscape and the gradual slope will lead to much more interaction of the people with the water. Because I think this concept is quite missing in India, because in any most of no not any but in most of the waterfront where you will visit, we all at all these places we just have this direct slope, so people cannot just directly interact with the water. And yes, there is this mindset problem also, because if we allow them to interact with the water, then obviously this solid waste problem can arise. But in that area, I think because there were many villages around it, and they had a respect for the nature. So yes, this soft landscape can be provided at those places where we have enough buffer. I think minimum 100-meter buffer should be there.
I also have another point to make. When you make a hard toe wall, it has an impact on the opposite side of the bank, not immediately opposite, but a little bit more downstream, because it changes the hydrological characteristics of the river, and it erodes on the opposite side a little more downstream. So it's not something that we can just find a spot solution where the problem is. It's something that needs to be studied properly, and in almost all cases, a toe wall should be done only where there is very, very high level of erosion, which is difficult to contain because of the flow of the river. But in a pristine landscape like this, I think a softer approach is always better than going into a technical solution to solve a problem.
Yes, sir.
It's just a point I wanted to make.
Yes, sir. That's why we introduced this bamboo towel, and that I saw in Nagaland at one place during my internship. Me and my friend Vishal actually observed that. So that's why we introduced that bamboo towel only, just to keep it sustainable.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Kailash. I think we've almost covered all the questions. Thank you so much, Ms. Abita Sinha, Kailash Pati, Upma, for sharing your stories, experiences, memories, and learnings with us. The next Play Stories session, titled The Kish of Chinatown, Chinapada, Kolkata, is scheduled for 31st January 2021 from 5 p.m. onwards. Storyteller for the session, Ms. B. Jitu Gangadhar, Ms. Neem Purohit, and Ms. Ruchika Sharma will be taking us through the Chinatown in Kolkata and explore their collective memories of this very intriguing and interesting Chinese settlement. The place expert for the session, Mr. Satyajit Mal, will expand the narrative around this unique settlement and share his personal experiences of the beautiful mix of Bengali Chinese streetscape. So stay tuned for our upcoming Play Story. Once again, I personally thank each one of you for your participation and support to the Festival of Places. Look forward to meeting all of you again next Sunday, same time, same place. Till then, stay safe and stay happy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.